Have you ever heard about the more you own, the more the system owns you? That's unfortunate reality. Just let that sink in for a second. And as we sail into retirement, of course, I've been out retired now for about a year and a half. I start to think about simplicity, downsizing, simplification, getting rid of assets that many people call them assets. In actuality, many things are liabilities. But this is something that we all live and strive as we see all these busy workers heading off to their jobs for what? To chase the dollar, to buy that big house, to buy that expensive car. No, those are all great attributes. We need to feel like we're, contributing to society. And we feel like we need to be productive in some way. And this doesn't end. It's even as you go on in retirement, what I'm finding is now I have more of these days where I like to continue that level of productivity. I like to feel like I'm adding some value to society. But there is a reality that the more you end up taking on, the more it becomes a bit of a burden. As a matter of fact, here's a problem I'd like to have, but as they say, money causes problems. And there's a lot of people that say, you know what, when you have a lot of money, which I don't, but if you have money, millionaires, billionaires, many times over, a lot of those people say that now they have newfound issues that they never dreamed. I mean, when you think about it, when you're poor and you're impoverished and you don't have money, the main thing you think about is getting that next burger, getting that next sandwich, eating, having a roof over the head, the basics, the fundamentals. And that's a real serious thing. That's a stressor that a lot of people we know today, in today's day and age, we spoke of that, what's going on in today's world about the increased cost of living and how people are struggling these days just to make ends meet. But there is a reality that there's stress, anxiety in not having anything. And then there's this broad spectrum of, what they consider middle class, which, that's always a debate, but the conversation about going all the other way and having all this other assets, having houses and cars and boats and motorcycles and all of those things start to become a bit of a burden, start to become a bit of a hindrance. Now, you know what, let's be honest, as a retiree and anybody out there, what do we work for? What are we doing any of this for? Well, we'd like to be able to spend a little time, of course, with friends and family. And it's nice to have that hobby. I know people that the only thing that they care, they've got a motorbike, they've got a boat. That's the only thing that really motivates them. Now, I know many people who, have that motorcycle. Maybe live in a smaller house. Maybe they don't do a lot of other things. Well, that's quite honestly still a fairly simple life. They have their hobby, motorcycle. They love to feel the wind through their hair, and they love the excitement, the rev of the engine. And that's their hobby. And that's what we live for, our passions and our enjoyment in life. As well, sports cars. Somebody wants to drive that little sports car convertible. That's the only thing that they get sort of looking forward to on a Saturday night. It's a relatively cheap method of enjoyment. When you think about now, to go out to a movie these days costs a lot of money. You're talking about, for a family of 4 and popcorn and the whole 9 at a movie is going to cost you, $150 or more. Even sometimes having these hobbies that don't cost you a ton of money are fun, and they're great, and they're a way to sort of knock the dust off. They're also a way to give you something to look forward to, and of course just keep you out of trouble. But the idea of having all of these assets, people that quite often you walk by and you see a house and you see this big house, largely in most cases probably mortgaged pretty substantially, because ratio-wise, and the statistics show that the vast majority of people still owe a lot of money on their mortgages. But you'll see that big lifted up 4x4, and you'll see a boat and a quad and a bunch of toys that constantly rotate through that household. Now, that's absolutely great. They're living their best life, and certainly I can appreciate that. And and I was kind of living a bit of that life myself in my younger years. We all kind of do that. We get into the workspace, we start seeing all these shiny new toys. You're starting to earn this big paycheck. You start to look at, oh, I can afford that. You look at the monthly payment for your mortgage. You look at the monthly payment for that car. You look at the monthly payment, all these things. And all of a sudden you start adding the numbers. You're like, oh, and that still leaves me an extra $500 a month. I'm good to go. And that's just sort of this trap that we often get into. But what you start to realize is those start to own you. Those toys, those things, those boats and houses and cars, they actually own you rather than you own them. As much as you think they're an asset, as much as you think those things are great, I own all of this stuff. It's great to own some of that stuff if that's your passion, if that's your hobby, if that's enriches your life in some way. But if it's just an accumulation of stuff, then what that becomes is starts to become a little bit of a liability, because as you realize in life, later on, particularly as you get older, time becomes more clear, or the lack of time becomes more clear. And the idea that there's less and less of it, and the idea is that we don't have an endless amount of time left. So if you find yourself in a situation now, all of a sudden, you've got outstanding mortgage, maybe you're knocking on the door of 55, and you're looking at another 15 years of mortgage payments, you've got all these cars payments, you're thinking of all these things that you need to be paying for, but you'd also hate your job, your boss is pressing down on you, you hear that there might be some layoffs coming up. You talk about a stressful environment to be in. You're in your 50s, you want to leave, you're not sure if you can retire yet, but now all of a sudden you have these situations where you're caught up right to the hilt in terms of the money you owe to the banks, the money you owe to lenders. All this money you owe is now a bit of a trap. So where you once thought this was an asset base, where you once thought you had all these things that were making life better, the reality is much of that's not so much the case. See, because as you start to retire or you get closer to that date, and as I saw here in the last 5 years, I had this stronger focus on these target dates. I didn't know I'd be walked out the door. However, I did have this idea in my mind that I was going to retire somewhere in that 55 to 57 range to make it feel right for me, numbers, and to be kind of mentally prepared for that. But I didn't know things would be cut short a little early, but I did recognize that I was going to be leaving the job front and leaving it in a few short years. So I had to start preparing mentally, physically. And how did that preparation come? And no, it's not preparation H. It's a preparation that meant that I have to have these finances under control. I have to have debt under control. Do I have car payments? Right now, we have no car payments. I don't owe a dollar to the bank for any car loans or any of that, because it does not work when you're in retirement. Not really. I mean, some people have these massive retirement packages where they're collecting $8,000 a month. Most people don't. And so the reality is, I'm more like most people, and I do feel blessed that I'm in a position that I'm able to do this, but still not in a position where I can frivolously blow money left, right, and center. And so having a car payment right now in this life feels grossly irresponsible to me. But not just irresponsible, because what is responsible? See, that's another phrase that people kind of throw around, responsible. Buying a two-door sports car is not responsible. You should drive an SUV instead. See, things like that, those comments start applying and start embedding psychologically in our minds about what's good and what's bad, what we should and what we shouldn't. I personally still believe that you've got to do you. You've got to do your own thing. You've got to enjoy your own life in your best way. But instead of spinning off here, and we've been on a bit of a tangent, the bigger discussion here really is not about what other people think. It's the fact that you've got to make the right decisions for you. And some of those decisions might mean that you're going to have to do away with some of those assets. Some of those things that you think you own are taking your time. You're having to spend extra hours in the office. You're having to work on weekends. You're having to do some overtime. You're compromising your time. You're compromising your time, not just in general, but with time with your family, time maybe doing things you'd rather be doing. You're doing it to pay for things that sit in your driveway that provide no additional value. Now again, I'm not going to here promote and say that you shouldn't have toys, 100%, because life's not perfect and the world's not perfect. And if there's one solace we have in this world is to enjoy a little bit of our own time. If you like that little sports car, great. That's a Sunday driver. That's something that you enjoy. Maybe it's that motorcycle. Maybe you like to do those golf trips with the buddies, 2 times a year. Maybe that's the things you budget for, and everything else sort of takes a back seat. That's fine. We've got to live our lives. But just know the more junk, the more stuff we have laying around, the more we're in debt to the system. The system is owning us. I saw the other day, I was actually had a chat with a buddy in the neighborhood. It was quite funny because we were chatting. He has a couple dogs, and we have a couple dogs too. And I love dogs. Like they're great. Pets are fun. They do take work, of course, but they're a lot of fun. We have a couple little French bulldogs. We had an English bulldog years ago. We loved that thing, and then we got a pug. That Frenchie didn't last very long. She got really ill, and then we got a pug, which was fun. She lasted a long time. That was a great little pet. One of the best pets, like so friendly, so personable. And that was a great pet. Now we have these 2 little Frenchies, 2 totally different, one male, one female. And the personalities are night and day, but they're fun. And so I was chatting with this buddy around the lake who's basically got a couple of dogs of his own. And we were chatting about this, and we kind of laughed and chuckled because he said, I'm out taking the dogs for a walk. And he said, I just wanted to get out and enjoy the weather. And I said to him, and he laughed. It was all in good fun because we have that. We can chat like that. I said, are you taking them for a walk, or are they taking you for a walk? Because I said, I've seen guys in the area that have actually, oh wow, look at this. What is this? Clothes, all kinds of, I've been seeing, a lot of homeless, little homeless encampments here along this walkway, and I've seen more of it this year. People sleeping under the bushes. It's just, on a side note here, very tragic in that that's a common symptom now of what we're seeing in our society, of increased taxation, increased cost of living, stressors all around. I mean, everything is bearing down, and some people just are looking for that escape. Some people succumb. Some people can no longer integrate. Some people are struggling like straight. It's not easy right now. And so that's more to the point. The conversation around having all of these extra things just means now it's more burden, more debt load. And I know I've seen this before. I've talked similar topics before in the past, but some people who say he who has the most toys when they pass wins. That's kind of fun. And, the banks kind of end up taking it anyhow, or it seems like the governments take all of it away anyway. Once we come and we go, none of it really matters. It's all sort of gone anyhow. So there is that kind of mindset, but there's still that bearing down, working your way, working yourself to the bone every single day, week, month, year. Having to extend, instead of retiring at 55 like you'd like to, you're having to work till you're 65 or 67 just because you got sort of caught up in trying to compete with the Joneses and trying to do what everybody else is doing, trying to get that new SUV, trying to upgrade that house when your older house was just fine. All it needed was a new hot water tank. That's what ends up happening is people see that next shiny toy and then they want it. And we're all in the same boat. Again, I've had many of those years of that, but I did have one of those aha moments. And I had one of those aha moments. Of course, I've mentioned this about my parents getting ill and some of the financial issues around some of that. That sort of triggered me in new ways to rethink my life in general as a whole. And then on top of that, I think back about 10 years ago, the first wave of layoffs at the organization I was working at. I was new. I didn't suspect I had any issues at that time. But as time went on, it seemed like every 2 or 3 years, there was another major sweep. And so as this went on, this is nagging in the back of your mind that, sure, maybe I could find another job. Maybe I couldn't. Could I get a replacement job with the same pay? Because I was already doing fairly well for myself, I did okay. I kind of worked my way up there a little bit. But then there's that thought, like, can I continue to sustain this? Do I want to sustain this? And then when do I retire? When does this all end? So then I had all these thoughts in my mind about what's going on? Like, what does my future look like? Then I started thinking, I started seeing ill parents. And let me tell you, everybody, let me be perfectly frank. Nothing is as sobering. Nothing stops you in your tracks as fast, hard, and aggressively as a serious health diagnosis. Now, fortunately, knocking on a thick block of wood, I didn't have anything like that, but my parents did. And once they had that, that takes all of your other priorities, puts them back there behind you. And so instantly, your health, your parents, your family's health, everything becomes top priority. And so now you're starting to think, why do I work? What am I doing all this for? I don't even care. I want to spend time with family. I want to, do some of the simpler things in life. I don't need all this junk that I look around. And so in my mind, about 10 years ago, I started to see that. Now, yes, I still have my fun toys. We all have that thing, that one thing, but I don't get excited about it. I don't spend extra money. I don't spend on low quality goods. I'm one of the cheapest people. And I do it not to be cheap, but to recognize I'd rather redirect that money to a place that might help me not just get to retirement, which I am now. And fortunately, by doing that, it has actually helped me get to retirement by 55. But now it helps me sort of sustain that, because we all know that once you retire, you're in a little bit more of a situation of being somewhat financially restricted. And so as soon as that restriction starts happening, you have to start realizing that I got to make some changes here. We've got to fix this. This isn't working. And, spending money on junk, like going to the dollar store and coming out of there with $150 worth of trash that you're going to throw away in a month, just didn't make sense to me. Trimming down on what I'm eating when we go out to eat at a restaurant. Trimming down here, trimming down there. Those are all thoughts. But another major one was getting rid of debt. Credit cards, eliminating credit cards. I constantly get these credit card companies reaching out. Hey, we'll give you 15 grand. Hey, I got a call actually yesterday. Hey, you qualify for 15 grand, no questions asked. Boom, you qualify for 50 grand line of credit. You qualify. I don't want that crap. I said, no thanks, see you later. And so that's what's starting to happen is I find myself, nope, I don't need that. That's called debt. And I don't want any of that. And we spoke about this here this week as well in the video about how so many people get caught up in debt. Now it's not just debt, an optional debt or luxury debt, it's debt to pay for the bare essentials. See, because people are struggling. Now they're paying for their food, in some cases their bills, utilities, they're paying for with their credit cards now. Now they're going into hock for that. And it's quite an interesting experience to see that. It's sad. It's absolutely tragic, really. No other word for it. When people now are barely hanging on and having to utilize credit cards to pay for, a loaf of bread or a jug of milk. This is kind of the world we're in today. And so I'm trying my best. As most of you, all we do is navigate our life, enjoy those little sweet moments, and I'm trying to create more bigger sweet moments. That's why I retired early. And I'm trying to minimize those shittier moments, those crappier, those moments that aren't as good, like being on the job for 50 hours a week. There's nothing good there in my mind. There's nothing there that I feel is calling my name anymore. There's no point in working in the corporate game. And sure, while I enjoy my moments here, I do a little social media, the point is, like my wife just said, why don't we go down to Sylvan Lake, which is this nice little lake here just outside of Red Deer. It's about an hour and a half from where we live. And it's a beautiful lake. She said, do you want to go tomorrow? Because, it's Friday tomorrow, obviously. She said, do you want to go tomorrow to Sylvan Lake? And I said, you know what, I'm game for that. The beauty is, see, there you go, another guy right there. She took the day off and has taken a day off. She said, you know what, do you want to go down to Sylvan Lake? Are you busy tomorrow? I said, well, I'm always creating my content and putting together videos and coming with new ideas and brainstorming. That's what keeps my mind active. So a lot of the social media stuff honestly, one of the main objectives is to give me focus, keep my brain active, keep me moving, keep me thinking. And really it's for a little more than that, because I don't get paid a ton by doing this, but I do promise you that I do a lot of this to give me reason, to give me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It gives me a lot of focus. It gets my brain kind of operating and keeps me thinking, and puzzles and, all of that just keeps my mind active. And we know that is something that a lot of people, if they neglect it in their later years, it starts to catch up on them. So, but the fact is, I'm able to take tomorrow off. My wife said, let's go to Sylvan. I'm like, okay, let's go. I'm in. Let's do this. And so heading off to probably to Sylvan Lake tomorrow, heading on down there, gonna take a look around, probably spend some time on the beach, enjoy the sunny weather. The weather's still supposed to be fairly nice. This is the last stretch before, all the little ones go back to school, which we don't have any going back to school anymore. But this is just something that you can enjoy now with that extra time, that freedom. These are things that we can now truly enjoy. Instead of working for 50 hours a week, which I know a lot of my coworkers from literally 2 years ago that I was working side by side, they're there right now, and they'll be there tomorrow, and they'll be there on Monday doing that 9 to 5. And fortunately, I don't have to be, because I don't have to pay for that big house upgrade. I don't have to pay for that new truck I just bought last year. I don't have to pay for those things because I don't have car payments, credit card debt, and I just live a simpler life, because that's really what it is. So you can avoid being owned by the system. Anyway, please do drop a line. Don't forget to share and like and subscribe. Talk to you all real soon. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.